presentation. And what we're going to cover here is some really, really awesome stuff. So what we're going to cover what we're going to cover here is looking at how people win and how people lose, analyzing that so we can navigate an impossible roadmap to the family court process, which is more than likely probably torturing you right now. If you're in it at any level, it is a hard thing. What we want to talk about here is how not only do we learn the family court itself, go over the wins and losses, but we want to look at the patterns that attorneys make. So there's good attorneys, bad attorneys, and any good attorney can turn into a bad attorney. We're going to touch upon that a little bit. We're also going to look at how does the judge examine your case and what's important in that. This is really, really key, right? We're going to look at why this is impossible and how people go wrong with it. A couple things to remind you here is if you're watching this on the replay, you can watch it on double speed. I encourage you to go down into the YouTube show notes and not only look at the free content that I have and the different playlists that I have linked there right now that have to do with false allegations and these types of things, but you can actually go and click on the transcript button and you go, man, I don't want to watch this 90-minute, 2-hour, however long this ends up being thing, and you can download the transcript. There's also websites you can go to for that. That will just link you to the transcript. You don't have to go through all the different fuss of it. And then you can put that into something like Google Gemini, which you can put in longer format things in Google Gemini. So ChatGPT has a limit on how much you can put in for a 2-hour live stream. It might be the limit. And you can get it to consolidate what is being said or what times should I watch for this specific question. All of that I encourage you to do. And the reason why I say that is because I make these because I'm always working. We got done with 4 hours of calls just now for our groups where we go over a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about here. And there's a lot of information. I don't have enough time to make content and edit it. So I make these live streams so that I can work off of somewhat of a script, edit it, whenever I have time, or hire the right editor who can do it properly, and put out more content that is more bite-sized and easier to navigate. So if you're watching this and you really need help with this, we are going to cover a lot of good stuff that is immediately helpful to you, that will help you, right? Well, I don't want to give that guarantee, and this is part of it, right? Because everybody that wins in this goes through this struggle of a lot, this rigid, problematic family court system with this insane tenacity and also this thing which you need a lot of creativity towards. I know that may sound weird, but you're going to need to improvise quite a bit. Every winning person does that. You guys on TikTok, I was just saying that we're not going to answer questions on this, but if you do want to ask questions, you can go to my profile right now on TikTok, and there's a direct.me/Steve Maeda link. You want to get on the high conflict custody portal, and in about an hour from now, I'm going to send out an email, which will invite you on a Zoom call where I'll interact with you live, okay? And that will also be live streamed. So what you're going to get from the end of watching this video, so if you watch through everything I plan on covering here, you're going to know exactly why people win and lose in high conflict custody. So this is false allegations, parental alienation, narcissism, personality disorders of many different kinds. You're going to see why people win and lose, okay? You're going to understand how to isolate strategies that win, and it's going to be difficult. I don't want to say it's this easy cherry pickable thing. You're going to also understand the mindset of winning and losing and what makes, what adds to that. This is very, very important. And you need to know that this is going to be something that is navigating through one of the most complicated mythological things where there's so much bad information on. And where what I want to do is provide to you information from my groups of working this for 17 years. I've had the longest running support group for men with the most amount of wins. I mean, insane wins. If you guys are in my group and you were just on the call, you heard about a win that you don't see anywhere else from an amazing father who fought for his kids in some of the worst false allegations and parental alienation. And most people don't have cases that even come near his. He won. There's also men in our groups that have lost. And that's what it was built by, because nobody was giving us advice on how to win and how to lose. We had to figure it out ourselves. And so I'm sharing with you that information. That information, not legal advice. There's some probabilities that we may give you in the system. And It's hard. And sadly, what you're going to see here is there's a lot of bad advice. Really quick, once again, down below, there's some playlists in my YouTube. If you're watching this on TikTok, they're not there, but there's playlists in my YouTube that are going to cover more thoroughly the different things like false allegations, custody battles with people with NPD or BPD or any personality disorder. There's stuff specifically made for you, stuff on the courtroom process, and I really invite you to check those things out. If you'd like something further, like I said, we have free communities, we have paid communities. There's big differences between them, but part of the free community is going to be what you're going to see in about an hour. Okay, let's get into this, and let me take a sip. Hopefully you guys are doing all right out there. So the problem everybody runs into, the first thing which makes them blind in the family court system, is that they walk in with the good intentions, that I'm a good parent, that the truth matters, freedom matters, the American justice system matters, especially family court. The judge will see what's happening. And the problem with this is family court does not run on truth or justice or any of these things how you think of them. It has its own version and definition of that, which is very confusing. And what you need to understand is you need to understand the rules to a completely different game, okay? So at this point, so many people who have experience with family court will say that it's BS and it's a racket and all these things I'm not denying, okay? I'm with you on this. But what I'm trying to share with you is who was in extremely high conflict custody cases, who had their kids kidnapped to other countries, who had their kids parentally alienated them for multiple years, and then won them back and got custody. We have to take that information and look at it and try and distill it into some stuff where you could say, okay, how can I apply this in my case today? And in this, it is very important to distinguish that, number one, your idea of justice, your idea of being a good parent, your idea of how the courts work, your idea of due process, don't even think that in family court, is all wrong in family court. It's going to be different, okay? So we could see that as injustice, and it is. But if we want to win, if we want to be able to get custody of our kids, get visitation time, have our best chances at that, we have to start going, okay, this is a different set of rules, all right? Now, that being said, many of you are watching this having already set a few steps in family court, meaning you probably went to a couple of hearings, saw the disappointment in it, saw how crazy it is. But if you haven't and you're watching this, you're just getting started, you need to understand that you need to have a plan based on the new rules of this game, okay? Which we're gonna cover, which are in over 20 hours of videos that I posted in the month of October and whatever I've done in November so far, which is a lot. There are a lot of videos where we're talking about that with real life experience. You also need to understand all the definitions of what is weighed upon in family court and not how you think you understand it. So the best interest of the child and how you would argue that with your family and friends, I guarantee you is completely different from how you would argue that with a judge or what lawyers care about. So you need to understand those definitions. And also, you get so overwhelmed that you emotionally have to quit. You can't think about the legal, or the legal's so confusing that you just focus on the emotional, mental side of it. Okay, so the therapeutic side, the journey ahead, the mental toughness, and you forego the legal necessities that you need to do because it's confusing, all right? So we're trying to make it less confusing. And then you may also do this other thing of trying to fight for justice and how this breaks constitutional law and all these different things, which is very important, right? It's very, very important. And in family court, this gets overridden all the time. And there's all sorts of like jumps and steps that judges and mediators and everybody involved will make, and it's disempowering you. And we want to change that, but we have to change that after we're done with our case. Okay, we'll probably get into that a little bit more, but if you watch my last live stream on the key players in family law, you should really watch that one. Very few people tuned in. I guess I started it at a poor time, but it's really, really important for understanding the worth of a mediator or a supervisor or a court appointed therapist or a judge. And we talk about why they're important and what they mean, because if you expect something from a judge that shouldn't be expected, you've basically screwed your entire case. And the same thing goes for GALs or social workers and so on. And these are the things that we talk about within that. And we talk about them in a lot of videos, but that is very, very, very important. So what we have to look at here is we have to look at what are the patterns? What are the patterns that make people win and lose? And this is where we get into something which is very different of my perspective. And I'm sharing this with you not to talk about myself, but the only way I know how to share about it is to talk about myself. Really, what this is important for is that I have been with so many men who have won and lost in through their whole stretch. Okay, so not just for their case of when they entered into the family court system, but how they parent afterwards in up to 17 years, because that's how long my group has been around. So this is what I will call case law versus case life. Okay, so case law is what we study to look at the courts, and it's really useful. You should do it. You need to look up case law. But I have tons of dads that come to me and they say that they've studied all the case law and they've got it. So here's rule number one: you never think you got it. I don't think I've got it. The guys who've massively won in my groups, it was so difficult with the degree of their cases because we only get the worst. We only get stuff which is super high conflict. That's what comes to my groups. That's where this comes from. So if you're going through an amicable divorce or a custody battle, this probably isn't that relevant to you. But because we only get the high conflict stuff, we we see a lot of mistakes and so on. So when people research case law, that's good. That's a starting point. But it doesn't mean you know everything, because case law is going to look over decisions, it's going to look over different rulings, it's going to look over different outcomes. But what it misses there, and this is huge and a big reason why men who I've worked with have lost, is that it doesn't look over the behavior of the person. It doesn't look over the stretch of it. It doesn't look over the suffering. It doesn't look over the pain. And it doesn't look over why somebody actually gives up. So what we're getting from case law is the result of cases that are done, most of those cases. And that excludes stuff which is settled upon in mediation. That excludes things that are privately settled outside of court. And so it only gets what's been in court, and then we don't know exactly what went right and wrong. So just to put in perspective, there's many people that have gone to court and lost, and I've been with them on their case. And why they lost is not going to come out looking in their case law, right? That certain things could be excluded from evidence. It may have not made it into the court record, and you don't know why the judge would not allow that. Okay, so these things happen all the time in court, and so we have to actually look at the whole life of it. And so when you've worked with men for 1 year or 10 years, like long-term struggles, 17 for some of them. One of the first guys in the group in 2009, he's still on the calls, right? His child is an adult at this point. But seeing all of that, you get to see what works and what doesn't work, okay? So within all of this, every single day when you're looking at it, thank you, thank you. When you're looking at it, you're going to see what false allegations do on a day-to-day basis, how they hammer you mentally, but then also what you need to do legally in the moments where you need to shine legally. You're going to look at narcissistic abuse, how crazy that is. Like, this is one of the hot words that everybody talks about, NPD, and then I would actually argue that it's more than just that. It's not just that. I'm not discounting you with that. I'm just saying there's usually a lot more. Like in fighting these cases, you really see the depth of all of this. That's going to deal with gaslighting. That's going to deal with all sorts of codependency that's developed from this. That's going to deal with so many different things that are going to interfere with your legal struggle. And you have to look at it all, okay? Parental alienation, how that destroys you. Every single person that I know that's had parental alienation, no matter what their decorations were before, meaning they could be one of the greatest entrepreneurs or whatever they are, they're defeated by it. That doesn't mean that they gave up or lost, but every single day there's going to be a point of defeat and depression and pain that there's really no psychological community answering those questions for. This is also why that in my groups, we have therapists that are used to working on this because it's tremendously underserved, okay? So within all of this, there's this huge thing. Actually, I have down written here, supervised visitation, massive, massive. If you're parentally alienated and you go through supervised visitation, you're gonna have all sorts of interference that the other parent does that you're probably in fear of because you've had to, you know, give your soul basically in 18 months of horrible court fees and all sorts of pain that you had to get that supervised visitation for. You're convinced the courts hate you, and they might, right? But once again, you get walls there. The supervisor doesn't care. The supervisor may not have power over this. The GAL who might be involved doesn't care. There could be all sorts of problems with it. And you have another parent interfering with the visitation, continuing the parental alienation. So the court steps forward in a way which seems like you're getting screwed. But it's a necessary step. It's a very necessary step. Please, please watch. I should have linked to it in the show notes, the key players video, which talks about the different roles that people have, because it will break this down for you. If you need them, you need them. Okay. And if they're against you, you have to figure out how we can get them on your side. In fact, on our call today, I learned some stuff from one of the guys in our groups. He broke down what got him the GAL. There's actually just a comment on my TikTok saying, like, in order to get a GAL, you have to get them court ordered. And in order for a GAL to matter, you need to get them in court or something like this, like that. It was just like this catch 22 of it not working. Sorry if I disrespected your comment, but this is actually not true. You can make this happen. How do you make it happen? How do you do this? That's the point of all these videos, okay? So what I saw in all the different trials, the victories, the collapses, was I saw an emotional game mixed with a legal game and mixed in what actually won, what changed lives, what built better parenting structures, and all these different things. And there's so many of them there. And they're built off of so much pain. And I almost hate saying that because it's like we built this with losses and wins. And we have the most amount of winners that meet daily on our calls, the most, hands down, in anywhere in the world for high conflict custody and for men. Women, we're getting there. In January 2026, I plan on launching a community that serves women as well in this. Appreciate you guys. I'm trying to listen, but there's only so many hours in a day. I got to keep man, it's tough to run this business. But within that, we have so many examples of people that are able to win, but it's built off of guys who had no advice, the worst advice, the advice coming from everyone, the politically correct culture, men's culture, and all of it was wrong. All of it misled them. And I really want to be clear about that, right? I'm really critical about so much of men's rights because it has failed consistently. Failed. Like, I hate the fact that there are very few videos like mine. I'm not the only guy out there, but there are very few people talking about what actually can work and has worked for men. There's a question on here. How do you get in my group? Well, the people who are probably watching the rebroadcast of this are annoyed. But on any YouTube video, I think on any, you can go down and look at the first link in the show notes, and it will take you to the High Conflict Custody portal. It's actually now a free community. It may not be in all the advertising for it or whatever, but for free, you can get on an email list. You get a bunch of lessons. You also get calls, which we're going to have a call in about 40 some odd minutes, and where you can come on and interact with me, right? And if you sign up for it now, you can get there. If you're on TikTok, you can go to my profile and get there. If you think it's a scam, I'm sorry. I try and do my best to show you that it's the most legitimate thing that you can do, that I need to do in a way that sustains my business so I can make videos like this. You're more than welcome to never be on my email list, to never get whatever, and only watch the free stuff on YouTube and TikTok. Cool. It's all good, right? But that is how I distribute the information. I'm one guy with a couple of employees, right? So there's a lot that I do, and that's the best way to do it. Okay, so let's look at this next thing, studying the law. So a lot of the major problem with the narrative of family court comes from both our normal standard culture. I'll call it the politically correct culture, but the culture that we get advice from online that sounds good and everybody's smiling and it seems professional and good, oftentimes extremely wrong, or telling the truth about something but missing pivotal aspects to it. The other side is going to be missing something from the other side is the men's side. So the men's rights or father's rights or different manosphere uh, outlets for this. And some of those guys I know, and I've worked with them for many, many years, and there's a reason why I've never fully endorsed it, many, many reasons why, but they fail considerably at what you need to do for family court and how to win as a man, especially when you're being accused of abusing your kids in whatever different ways. Okay. So when we only study a certain type of family law experience, which let's say when we only study the wins, we get a lie about what the reality is. And this kind of doesn't make sense, right? So I have winners who are with me every single day that we talk about how we won. Okay. In those wins, one of the reasons why this is wrong is in the general public, which talks about only wins, is it gives you a fantasy, gives you overconfidence about the family court. It doesn't teach you to check yourself properly. Okay. So you're walking into this and you're going to be inundated by so many different variables. And we're telling you this one trajectory that worked for our specific case that may not be like your case and in a different state and county or a different legal system entirely. And it gives you a false sense of confidence to move in that direction where it could be shot down from the start. Your evidence might not be done right. You might have needed to put in affidavits or whatever. Somewhere in the process, you're going to get catastrophically wrong. The other thing, too, is survivor's bias. So this is important. When people win in family court, the narrative of what made them win is not necessarily accurate. And this is something that happens to me, but in observing just thousands of people at this point who have gone through the experience and I mentored them through it, win or lose, their narrative of the end is completely different than what actually happened. Okay. And so this is something that you also need to keep in mind. So when you're getting a narrative of what wins, people tend to pick up the highlight reel. They tend to accentuate how good they were. And man, I'll just tell you this: like that's not what happens. And it's no disrespect towards anybody who's won. You did the best thing. It's just pushed through this filter of a culture of so many different fears and whatever it is that navigates that for you. But it's not true. It's not the reality. Okay. There's also usually an unrealistic roadmap that goes in with people's stories of where they won. So they tell you a simple checklist and they don't tell you all of the time in between. So for instance, let's go through this. If there's parental alienation, narcissistic abuse, or false allegations, they're going to tell you a checklist of what they did. And they're not going to tell you the in-between time. And the in-between time is going to be 3 months, 6 months of hell, of a lot of thinking, which is torturous in a lot of ways where you give up, okay? So where you give up on different things. Somebody writes in here on TikTok, I have some real questions if you don't mind. And I've told you guys over and over again, if you want to talk to me in 33 minutes from now, there will be a Zoom line open, but you have to be on my email list for it. And again, I'm not trying to like put you in some pigeonhole of email marketing that's going to screw you over. It's a free community that you can be a part of or not. And or you can be on here. On Tuesday night, I will do a Q&A for TikTok where you can actually talk to me and we have those different things. And we have Zoom calls 6 days a week. And sometimes somebody writes in here, do you have so we have Zoom calls 6 days a week for my paid community, okay? Which you don't have to be on. But there we work our asses off. We have legal assistants, lawyers, we have therapists come in and work with you and me on almost all those calls. So in 6 days a week, there's 9 calls. So there's multiple calls a day often, and I'm on at least 6 of those. Probably I'm on 7 of those. Anyway, whatever. So there's a lot of service within that. But on the free calls, okay, they're 3 times a month. You're going to have one tonight. Hopefully you're on it. Okay. If not, cool. No problem. No problem. I'm not here to disadvantage anybody more than they already have been by the system, by any means. Okay. So, also from a false winners narrative, what we're gonna get is they're not gonna show you the times they collapsed. They're not even gonna be able to remember it, probably because it was so traumatic, it gets blocked out. They're not gonna show you the mistakes they made because those things happen, and maybe they will, but they're just not gonna remember them. Okay, this phenomenon, it just doesn't happen, it's not available. So you need to understand that. So nobody also shows the moments when everything fell apart in every super high conflict. Okay, so if you're not going into something that's ultra high conflict, you may not have an opportunity to completely fall apart. But if it's super high conflict and you won, you've definitely fallen apart. And that's not because you're weak or anything to be ashamed about. It is the emblem of one of the hardest things that you're ever going to do in your life. Okay, so that was winning. What happens when we only study winning? We get a false narrative of the process. What happens when we only study losing? Okay, this is also a lie, and we'll build a false narrative of this. And this is what you hear about most online. Okay, so my last live stream, somebody on TikTok was just going off, man. And I decided to engage, which is always a bad idea. Okay. Some reason on TikTok, it's always a bad idea. YouTube is so much better. But hey, TikTok people, there's plenty of you great people out there that really want to do something, good with their advice. But the studying the losses, this is what the manosphere does. This is what the men's rights group does. They study the losses and they obsess on it. And it gives hopelessness, it feeds conspiracy, despair, the attitude of nothing works, and reasons to give up, and that somehow you can fulfill getting your kid back fighting to change the laws. Now, there's a couple things with this, because obviously you come back and you argue the laws need to be changed. The system's broken. It needs to be tore down and rebuilt. I agree. But first, do you want to do that or do you want to fight for your kids if you can win for your kids? Now, because of a lot of men's rights or other crappy advice on custody, maybe that women listen to, but men's rights is super guilty of this. It says it's impossible with countless men who agree with that, that show proof. But if we look at their case, we can see, even in their case law, in the times when they didn't give up, we can see where where things went wrong. So, I'm sorry, if you look at their case law and it doesn't show how they gave up or the different points of their mental struggles in it and so on, we can see that, and especially if they give us the evidence that they've submitted, which the judge kicked out, which isn't gonna show up in their case law, and we study their case that way, you're definitely gonna see where they could have done better. So, every guy that fails at this usually has something that he could have done better. Same with a woman. Now, I'm gonna tell you this, that doesn't mean you're not a victim. That doesn't mean that horrible things didn't happen. Those things happened. So I'm not denying that. But if we're gonna get to the center point of where guys win, well, all of them had tragic losses. So one of the guys on the calls who was going over something about courtroom procedure, and he made it sound super clinical and super awesome and just tight. I then asked him, "Well, had this ever been a problem for you before?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, yeah, totally." For I forget how long it was, but for years, it catastrophically screwed up his case. So he didn't understand how to properly do it, and he put in the blood, sweat, and tears to learn the right way to do it. And again, it's like when we remember the winning narrative, we forget the tremendous losing aspects of it. And I remember it because I was there with him during it. And it was very, very difficult, you know? So when we study just the losses, we we then start to look at what's going to fulfill the narrative of my pain. Okay. So I am robbed of being a father, like there's no freedom, whatever the different thing is. So I'm going to start looking at where things went wrong. So the judge didn't care. They're not following constitutional law. It's terrible, all terrible. I'm with you. It's all terrible. But if we're going to win, we have to go, okay, what can I change here? What can I do in the next court appearance to win favor? And is that possible? Which it probably is possible. So a lot of times they say that a judge is so biased or lawyers are so evil that it's impossible. So now my only option is to complain and get angry about it. This is look, I have so much stuff to complain about with this. You probably have just your family, which is terrible and worthy. But when you think about this, I have my family, I have other men's families, and I have other men who are in prison for false abuse, crazy stuff in their families that I have walked through and watched. I get how evil it is. I get it. I get it. And so when I look at who's changing these things, there's very few people changing the Constitution. A bunch of people with petitions, but there's one Robert Garza. There's a bunch of people that say they wanna help men, and there are very or women or whatever it is, but there are very few people doing what it takes, finding the right information, looking at what works and what doesn't, and there's a whole lot of, "Here's all these examples of losing, I got the stats, so it's true, and I can give up and hate the government and wind down the drain as a mom or dad," and we've all been there. It is not something which will have great benefit in your life, and you can also work on winning your cases in a good way, right, that has some history to it, that will make it easier for you to work on that stuff of trying to change the laws afterwards. And again, that's what Robert Garza did. Okay, so what I wanna go over here next is what can you do to really look at this? And this is where it gets hard. So I wanna help you as much as possible so you just watching this video can understand this and then do it. So you need to find 10 wins and 10 losses, all right? How do we find that? And why? Well, the reason is because you want 10 wins and 10 losses because so much more is gonna come out of that. And even better, you want a diversity of it. So here's where it needs to be specific, and here's where it needs to be diverse. So specifically, it needs to be with what you're going through. So this could be false allegations. This could be a narcissistic partner or a borderline partner. You could deal with alienation. There could be domestic violence. There could be protective orders, some form of high conflict. There could be financial issues. There could be supervised visitation, relocation, reunification. Okay, so all these different things. Trying to modify your parenting plan, you wanna find 10 wins, 10 losses, okay? Now, why you want that is because you wanna see what works and what doesn't and how that applies best to you. If you find a few wins and no losses because 'cause they're toxic and they're gonna be evil for you, you're going to have an unrealistic map and false confidence towards this, straight up. You can never have false confidence in family court. You really need to know that. You can always lose. You can always lose everything. Okay. I am not afraid of that, if that makes sense. I'm not afraid of being terrified every time I'm involved in family court. You know why? Because that yields the best result. That's going to do the best thing for me. Okay. So if I actually want the best probability of winning from what I've seen, and I've seen a lot, but again, I could be wrong in this too, right? I am better off not being overly confident, not being falsely confident, but always seeing ways where I could lose. Okay? So very, very important. Now, here's another interesting thing. We don't need 10 wins and losses with our judge. This would be good, but we want some diversity too. So for instance, if you get 5 from your judge or 2 from your judge, that would be good because it's gonna show the consistency in that. But what's so important with super high conflict, so when we get to parental alienation, false accusations, being put in jail, facing criminal, like all that diversity, it's crazy. What's necessary, what I've seen for a man to win in that, and again, mentored tons of men into wins from this, okay? When I see that happen, that man had to get insanely creative and tenacious about his case. So he had to not give up. This is a loaded thing. So most people have an idea of what not giving up is. What I'm meaning here is you'd have to talk to for a long time a lot of the guys who have one. Not giving up is not just fortitude and toughness, but you have to be able to fight on. Okay, so everybody says they're ready for that, but then when they are $10,000 in the hole, their attorney's asking for another $30,000, they're facing jail time, and they're offered a plea, you plenty of people give up, and it's not because they're weak, it's because they have no other options, right? So, we have to learn, how do we keep moving forward? How do we keep moving forward in this, okay? And how is it that we do it and remain creative? How do we start looking for things? Okay, so lawyers are good. If you're in super high conflict, you should be consulting with lawyers. Whether you're going pro se or not, you need to have your finger on the heartbeat of your family court system, okay? Lawyers are gonna know a lot of that. But with or without a lawyer, you're gonna have to be insanely creative to make things work. And this is why you want some of those wins and losses from other people. This is also why I always encourage people to form communities. So everybody says they want to do it, nobody does it. Somehow I'm one of the people who's done it for a long time. Okay. And I wish there were more, right? I'm not in competition with people on this. I think more people should be doing it. It's totally underserved. You should be doing it. But here's what I did. I had a problem with family court. It was tragic. And I had already worked in communities and built communities myself. So I started from scratch and I started building communities. What you could do if you really want, like, it's one of the most valuable things that you can have, and it's going to get you your 10 wins and losses. You might have to build for those wins. It could be a little bit tricky to find them or cultivate them. Like I cultivated them. I started mentoring people and getting them to those wins, right? So, how do we get those wins or how do we get that group? I started putting out videos and saying, like, hey, I'll help you with this. And this was a long time ago, and you build something up and you could make it a business, you could make it not a business. All right. It's difficult, apparently, because nobody else does it. It's something that I'm naturally good at, but I would highly, highly recommend it. Okay. Because you're going to get a diversity of people that you can talk to that have won and lost. And then you need to be the leader of that group or something like that. And being the person who facilitates the group, you need to calm it down. So when people talk about like it's all unfair and it's horrible, that's going to be there, right? I don't try and shut somebody down with that. There are tragedies that are always happening, and you need to start working with them to understand what's the real picture here. And you can start to see it with a bird's eye view. Okay. Another thing that you can do to find your 10 wins and losses is watch family court. What you can do for that is you can watch family court in other states and counties as well as your judge, if you can. Some people can't. But anybody could watch Dallas County's family court system. Now, that will cut out things like protective order cases and things like that, but you're going to get an idea of how things work. And that will help you understand people that win and lose. But you need a spectrum of that, of why, and you need to be able to step back from it. The tough part about this, and the reason why community is so important, is because you're so emotionally detached. Your kids ride on this. So it's hard to separate yourself from that. But it's so important to be able to do that. So important to be able to at least have people that can keep you in check to pull you out and get proper perspective of it. There was a gentleman who was talking to me, and there's an issue with his attorney. It's really common, really normal. And we were talking about it, and we were going through all this structure. And it wasn't until, a couple minutes had gone by, and I asked, well, have you talked to him about this? Have you talked to him specifically about this? I just assumed he did, and he didn't. And that would be the starting point, right? But when we get so enmeshed in our own case, we may leave out simple things, right? Simple things that we would normally think about that would be the starting point of working on something, but instead we jump to panic and tragedy. And for good reason, because we could lose our kids. Good reason to be panicked about and all that sort of stuff. Okay. So you're going to see when you study these 10 winners, 10 losers, you're going to see what the losers did. You're going to see what the winners did. You're going to see what attorneys they had. You can see people, the benefits of pro se, the downsides of pro se. You're going to see what mattered, what evidence mattered, how the law was argued in different ways. And you're going to look at how bias is triggered, how it's triggered with GALs, how it's triggered with judges. You're going to see where people acted out of turn and pissed off the judge, okay, spoke out of turn. You're going to see where and how people quit for real. And you're going to have an objective perspective on their cases instead of only seeing it through a filter of your case. And this would make sense. We only want to focus on our case because that's the thing in front of us. But we have to get a little bit more perspective. It's just very, very important. Okay, so let's look at patterns that always appear. So if we study people that win and lose in family court, and we look at the process and we see winners and losers. What do they do, right? And this is where I'm going to go over the winners first, but I want to be really careful with this because just getting this list and this information, the way I'm telling it to you, it's not enough. You're going to need to do more. You're really going to need to get your hands dirty, understand the law, watch family court, interact with people, hopefully get in a community. All right. You can't just take this information and let it run. All right. So what winners do that I see in my groups, super ultra high conflict with men, lots of false allegations, lots of domestic violence protective orders, lots of parental alienation, lots of all these things that we hear about. Narcissistic women over and over again. If you're a woman watching this, it's probably going to be very similar for you, right? You're going to look at men who stay consistent, okay? They learn to follow evidence and not emotion. They learn to follow courtroom procedures. So they learn it. They learn how their court makes decisions. So not how you think it does, not what you think the evidence should be. You look at what is actually working in family court. They're going to avoid the moral war. So when we have our kids taken away, we get a lot into the aspect of fatherhood, and we think that could be an argument. It's not. Okay, we then look at freedom. We look at the Constitution, and family court doesn't need to care about those things. Okay, which you might go, oh my God, this is horrible, horrible. I should give up. No, you just need to know that that's the rule set. A judge has huge discretion to be able to make, because they're dealing with property, they're dealing with finances on deep levels, they're dealing with uh, all sorts of crazy, crazy financial stuff, right? It gets so nuts. That's some of the stuff that takes the longest at time. It could be real estate. It could be overseas properties, like when we dealt with international kidnappings. It gets so nuts what that family court judge has to decide upon. I'm not saying this is right, but because there's an awareness that they're going to deal with visitation, violence, uh, neglect, all forms of abuse, as well as complicated financial matters, real estate, and so on, that family court judge can rule on things not following the due process that we expect. This is terrible. I think it's bad, right? I'm not saying it's right. You need to know that, because if you don't know that, you're going to set up your case for due process that will not work. You're going to expect something to work that doesn't work. And I'm telling you that you can research that. You can look at that. And this is what winners do. They look at how the law is argued specifically in their court. And your court is going to be bad at this because they're bad at so many things, but they want you to know it. So there's some outlet, whether it's the county clerk, whether it's a pamphlet or a website that helps you navigate you through this, or different classes. Those things could exist, and the winners will find them. Winners will also accept what a judge rules upon, even when it's unacceptable. Okay. So they accept it because if they argue it in that court and get angry, not following the process of appeals, which are a pain in the butt, but we've had guys in our groups pull them off pro se, by the way. Um, a judge signs the wrong document. A judge is biased in a certain way. What is going to work to get the right result? Our first thing will be to recuse the judge or get the judge to recuse themselves, right? And that's not the best first step. Watch the last live stream I did on key players because we talk about that a little bit. There is a set of probabilities that we've seen in our group work for that, like if your judge is biased, if the CPS worker is biased, how do you work with that best? And there's a lot, and they're all different, and you need to know it. The winners look at all these different things. Okay, winners will document everything, but also realize what that documentation is going to argue. And they're going to look at how it's argued in front of that judge and what it means. They're going to be able to point that out. They're going to build credibility early, because if they lose credibility, they realize that they're walking into a court system that isn't going to take them seriously. So if you've lost credibility in the court, how do you get that back? Again, watch my other videos, which break these down, and they're complicated and long. It is not a simple thing. Okay. So they're going to understand what they need to be doing with their child during this whole time. So many people, when they get screwed by the courts, well, give up certain visitation and custody when they don't have to, or not know how to properly reach out to the child, and not know what looks good in the court, how a psychologist or a therapist, some expert witness, would respond to how they're acting, and so they do it wrong. Okay, they're not looking at the right angles of it. So winners consistently do those things, but again, that checklist of things that winners do, you need to do your due diligence on and work very hard at it. All of them are going to be mentally and emotionally challenging. They're just difficult, man. What can I say? Okay, so what do losers do? Losers are gonna panic, they're gonna react emotionally, they're gonna get in arguments outside of court. How can you not? We all start off on the losing page here, right? This is really just being real with you here, right? It's so difficult. They're going to fight to be right. They're gonna go in and tell the judge what the law is. They're gonna tell attorneys what the law is. They're gonna argue. They're gonna think they're smarter than everybody. This is a huge one, man. Huge one. I get that you're intelligent or not. I don't really care. You know what I know from having these straight up. And if you come on my calls, we'll see this. The people that win, their intelligence just has to be good enough to read, and not even read anything complicated. Like that's what you need to win in family court in my groups. All right. So it's great if you have more intelligence. It's great. There's other variables to it. But if your ego comes into play, thinking you're smarter and better and can outwork anybody, you are, when you get floored, you've never been floored that hard. And so then you go on to the men's rights thing of saying like you can just complain about it. It's like it is so sad to predict that. I try and compassionately talk to the men in my group that come in with that mentality. And the stats would show that they will have the biggest losses. Like that is something, if you do not change, I will bet that you will be devastated by this. You might even get your kids, but you'll think you lost so bad you'll never recover from it. And that is terrible. Okay. So people that lose also lose in their first two court appearances. So whether that's losing credibility or they take a huge step backwards. Now, check this out. If you're watching this and you need desperate help in this, more than likely, you've already lost your first two court appearances and something bad has happened. Okay. So we can recover from that. But if you want to make everything way more complicated, screw up your first two court appearances, which is very difficult to prepare for. There were two guys going into their first court appearances that were on the call tonight, and we were trying to help them on what they could prepare for. Lots of guys, there's the mental support, there's the emotional support, and then there's what to do legally. Okay, what happens when you don't know something? Where do you go to, right? How do you do those different variants of things? All right. So very, very important. So family court is probability and risk. It is not fairness. Okay. So if you're going in with just the average human mindset, almost no matter what country you're in, and you're walking into family court, but especially US, Canada, Australia, England, trying to think of the other big ones. You know, Mexico's family court system, when we have cases there, much much better than the US's. Like it's kind of crazy. Parental alienation cannot be argued in the US most of the time. It's changing. Hopefully, it changes even more. In Mexico, it's a law. You can go to court and have successful arguments on parental alienation with a way to prove it. In most US court systems, and when I say most, I mean like if you show me an example where it is recognized, like you keep a child away from a parent and change the narrative of that parent to that child, that you can argue in Mexico, and you cannot in most states. And never say never, never say it's 100%. But from what I've seen, you cannot argue that. You can argue other levels of parental alienation, but that's crazy. So if you're in any family court system, you need to understand that this is not about how you view fairness. Okay, it has its own version of that, which is crazy. But this is about what risks you can take and the probabilities of that. All right. Very, very important. Okay. So when we're in this, what's so interesting is because there's always a risk, I have to warn you, right? Not legal advice, all the stuff that we always hear from this, but you stepping forward in this, you need to know that your relationship with your kids is on the line. Okay, so every dad that comes into our group that wins knows that. They never think, like they are taught over and over again that if you step forward with this, it's on you, so you do your due diligence. How do you do that? You can talk to lawyers, you can watch family court, you can interview tons of different people, you can talk to other dads, you can start charting things out, you can use AI, you can do all these things, but you should be doing all of it. You need to double and triple check everything because it's all on you, even if you have the best lawyer in the world. If you paid $10,000 to an attorney to work the discovery of your case and you do not know how to go over that discovery, you have to learn as quick as possible. And because it is what risks will you take? What's the probability in that? If you do that, your probability of winning goes way up. Now, this, for a guy like me, that is too much to ask. That is tremendously confusing. This is almost impossible to get me to go, man, how can I understand this crazy complex thing? I had to be in court a lot to get it. I had to form a group and start, working with all sorts of attorneys to get a grip on it. And then somehow I got a grip on it really well, where I could start working with people and mentoring them to winning, right? And winning myself. It took a long time. This is not natural to me. Okay. And remember what I said, you don't need to be highly intelligent for this. You need to be competent and you need to be able to work very hard and not give up, which is a whole big definition. Because when you look at winners who didn't give up, it's not the same idea of what our social narrative is of what somebody looks like when they don't give up. Okay. So you need to understand that the rules of family court are going to change. So how can you improvise? How can you switch it up? This is very important. How can you do that on the fly? That's going to happen. If you have high conflict and you end up winning, there's going to be multiple times in your case, more than likely multiple times, of where you're going in one direction. You're going for NPD, and you have it slam dunk, and you realize, oh man, our expert witness is changing their testimony, and you have to go this direction. You are going to need to switch things up all the time. So it's constantly changing. Judges can change. Your GAL might get discredited. Your therapist might get discredited in some way or be afraid or harassed by opposing counsel. All these things happen all the time. Narratives change, but there's always something you can do. Okay. That's something you can do might actually be to move on and you can't win legally. Now, again, people hear me say that, they go, "Oh, man, you're quitting." Look, nobody is I hate to say this, nobody's doing what I'm doing. And sometimes people do have to move on. They cannot function, right? Winning would take too much out of them, and it would hurt their life, and they need to take a break. And maybe they can come back to it later. But this is an important thing to look at. In the reality of every guy that's won, I'll tell you this, he has to take a break. He has to consider giving up and stopping. These are the cases that last like 2 to 10 years. You're going to have to stop for a while because it's too much. If you don't think that and you give the information that that's weakness or somehow wrong, that fits into the absolute lying, false, helping men and women commit suicide, probably didn't need to be devastated and crushed by the false information out there, but that is the case. That's what I see, okay? So, just my opinion, but very important. You're gonna be hit hard with a lot of things, and you can make it through. You can make it through alive. We also have proof of that, but the real story of that is much different. Okay, so let's actually look at one of the biggest culprits in this, because when we get into false allegations, when we get into, man, parental alienation, we usually have a personality disorder involved. When there's a personality disorder involved, things get really, really messy. So, narcissistic abuse, borderline abuse, any type of toxic relationship abuse, the trap of hatred and brainwashing. This is going to be huge that you need to look at people who've won and lost. Because if you're going through this, you are going to have gaslighting. You're going to have all sorts of convincing from the narcissistic co parents, your ex or borderline or whatever, that they're more powerful than they are. They can defeat you in these ways. You're going to think that you're guilty for things that you're probably not. And there's going to be some things you did wrong, but you're always going to be obsessing about that. And then you're going to always give them the buy. So we talk about this a lot. Please watch my narcissistic abuse playlist. We get into this a lot, and there's a free course on it that is coming out, and I'm trying to rewrite it so it's unisex, so both women and men can go through it. But there are differences. Like, I just got to be real with you guys. If you go for the idea that because I'm giving advice to men on this, that I'm somehow discounting women. I've just worked with a ton of men, like in huge amount of experience. And the differences of how they're attacked, the different ways they need to defend themselves, and the consequences are very different. So there could be humiliation and lying and all these different things, but it's very different because NPD, BPD, all these things slip through the culture. So the narcissist is going to empower themselves in the way that the culture allows. Well, it's going to be very different for men and women. Okay. But that being said, it's going to cause huge problems. And the consequences for this, for any parent, is going to be mainly with the kids. So you're being tortured, and while you're trying to defend yourself and survive, stay alive, right? You're just trying to do that. Your child is going to be harmed worse, believe it or not, than what you may be going through right now. The other thing you need to know with things like NPD and personality disorders and so on is the hatred that you have in this is going to be very, very real. And our society and culture says it's not. Okay, so it basically says there's no reason for you to be a, a hateful person, and it's unhealthy and all these different things. And it's a very, very real factor in it all. You're going to experience those different things. All right. So now I'm just checking all the different media stuff because the Zoom call is the email for that is going out right now, uh, where you can get on and talk to me. But we still have a little bit more to cover. I just wanted to check all the different stuff on all the crazy gadgets, camera, phone, script, which also has the Zoom call on it, and the YouTube live stream and all this sort of stuff. Okay, so when it comes to being abused by any toxic person, there's a huge mental struggle in this. You're going to want to win and defeat them. You're going to go through points of extreme vengeance, which are going to pollute. It's absolutely going to pollute your legal mindset. It's going to get you off script and off structured. You're going to also then swing back from despising them and hating them and coming back to, well, I need to forgive. And what's interesting is most of the advice on forgiveness doesn't come from this. So there's advice on forgiveness from a toxic partner, a narcissistic relationship. But where this gets tricky is, does it also include high conflict custody or divorce? Because, man, if you forgive too quick, so forgiveness is great. I want you to achieve it and work towards it. In fact, it's a huge theme in our groups of going to what works in that. But if you do that and it goes into your legal case or your perspective on what you need to do there, you will get screwed. And tragically, this is the biggest points of losing with NPD come around this. Not the deception of them, not the deceit, not their ability to lie. It comes from you giving them some sort of grace or some sort of forgiveness early on or for a moment, and then flipping that to manipulate the case to empower their lie, to empower their ability to be deceptive, and they'll use it to destroy you. That is easily the most obvious thing that you can see when you take a step back from people who lose to people with NPD, or fighting somebody who has NPD or BPD or some toxic traits. It's that huge. Okay, so What about the point of decision for people who quit, people who give up, people who lose versus the winners? Everybody loves to talk about this one. Everybody loves to say that if I just get the mentality, I can do it. But when your kids are on the line, the most important thing, you're not upset about them because you're a weak person or a bad person. You're upset about that for some legitimate reasons. I mean, it's like a screwed up thing. You're losing your family, your dream, the thing that you're supposed to care about most, your children. It incites, and this is different for men and women. So with women, it's going to trigger them in one way, and men, it's going to trigger them in another way. But they're both triggered in like it's super important, as it should be, as it absolutely should be. What's that decision, right? Let's look at that. So I've watched men quit and do it in a point where they could have still kept fighting and probably won many times. So again, if we go back and we look at all the men who comment on my videos saying that you don't understand, I had to quit or whatever, and if somehow I get in a dialogue with them, because I'm not trying to shame those men. Like I've been right there, man. I just didn't want to be there again, and so I started to learn more, build a group, build a community, work with people. Like everybody says they want to do that, but they don't do that. You should, you really should. And when I saw that, and I built these dialogues with these guys, you saw where they did lose. It's because they quit and gave up, even though they had the mentality not to do that, right? But they felt they were forced to, and they didn't have the right information. Now, this is a huge problem. There's not enough information out there. And if there was a way that I could easily deliver it to you, I would. But the best way is literally getting on the calls and talking with me and other guys in the group. That's the best way because everything's so unique. All right. So I've watched men quit at the right moment. And what is this? They're not quitters. They're not losers. They're not bad people. But for money, mental health, for sanity, for their ability to be a good father for the next 20, 30 years of their life or whatever their remaining lifespan was, that they would be with their kids, they had to move on. This is very real. So what's the distinguishing point in that? The more we believe in the false narrative of why people quit and succeed, which is delivered in one way from the men's development side of things, like it's like toughness and being badass and you've accomplished a lot of things, that'll make you lose. Okay. And that also doesn't explain why people do have to give up. It's kind of like this thing I've been on this rant for a little bit in some of the videos, but with veterans, you know, who have PTSD. We have the celebrity heroic vet that is probably a great person that has some really amazing qualities that allowed them to beat PTSD or whatever their situation is, or end up being functional. But that's what all the public sees. That's what the entire social narrative starts to see. And then there's vets, a ton who can't do that. Well, that's not happening. And they're doing everything that the social narrative has gotten from the celebrity vets, which may not be everything because you're not working hand in hand with them, but you read their book or you listen to their podcast and you give advice to those vets who are having trouble and you're giving them a wrong answer. So this is the same thing that we have in family court. Here's how you win, here's how I won, and it's this selective BS that is incomplete at best, but usually not true. And then we have from the PC side or the politically correct side, the normal, the stuff you look at Instagram or wherever or on YouTube or TikTok, how you feel good at this and whatever, makes you feel better about the situation. And these people moved on because they just had a broken heart or they just had trauma or they just couldn't do these things. But then there's no real helping to any of those people, meaning that the advice given from both sides does not have to be responsible for why you lost. In fact, it gets even more sick and twisted than that because it says you just didn't do what this person did, right? So when they're telling you the PC side about forgiveness or whatever, these sorts of things, you weren't confident enough, or you're not really caring about your kids or whatever stuff, which is so easily said by people, but not actually true. They didn't actually experience that. They read it in a book or some third party. Now, maybe they did experience it, but remember, people don't remember well how they went through those things. So they just see it as a tough time. They got a hobby and they forged on. That's that's the deal. And if they are broken by it and it's been years, they'll describe it in a different way. They'll just say, "Man, I just can't make ends meet," or "I can't get out of debt," or I just can't control my weight." It becomes this other problem, and it's never rooted to the thing that really switched that. Anyway, it gets very, very deep with all these different things. So we see a false narrative of why people quit, why people move on, and why people win over and over and over again. And it's pinpointed on some decision that if it's a critique on why people quit, it's not responsible for solving the problem. It doesn't even hit what the actual problem was. And if they won, it's a fantasy because they didn't really remember, right? Very, very difficult. And this is obvious to see. If I got 10 guys, 10 women who won and told me and said, "Tell me your story, swear under oath your story," and then I got their case, it would read differently of why it won and why, and the factors that they say are true, but they would be misinformation for you, a new person doing this on what would make them win and lose. It's really crazy. This is crazy to look at. You have to understand this. Like, you have to get the right information on it, of what actually happens. And again, where does this come down to? Okay, how did I learn this? How did I learn this? Okay, I won and lost myself, but then I talked to other attorneys. I talked to attorney after attorney after attorney. I watched family court. I started to understand everything I could about what is in the attorney general. What can you learn about child support? This doesn't make me an expert in any of these things, but it makes me an expert to my case. That's what we have to look at. Okay. And then I started to be an expert in these things because I made friends. I talked to other people doing this. And then I was like, well, I already have groups and I'm coaching people. Let's make it about this. And then you start to see things in real time, win and lose. Okay. The other thing, too, which is interesting in this, is my mentality coaching isn't that I just want to get a result for you. Okay. This is an interesting thing. So everybody is selling you a result. Okay, there's not a lot of coaching in this niche in particular, but everybody's selling you a result and then they're done. And I always say, I want to work with you on a result. It has to work, but it also has to work in your overall life. You should be able to be a good person and watch some of my other live streams that have to do with the more coaching experiential sort of thing and philosophical sort of thing, because in there we'll get to it and it's obvious. And this pattern you have over and over again: false information, false solutions, people down the wrong roads, people quitting too early. And this could go into all the same stuff: PTSD, depression, male suicide, loneliness, uh, dysfunctions in different people's lives, NPD, BPD, whatever, dealing with abuse, same pattern: false solutions, quitting too easily, buying into the wrong stuff, and not people sticking with them to the end of it. Now, I don't just want to put it out there that I'm a martyr for everybody, but if you want to work, you want to work with me in that level, we can do it. And I've just always done it. Because of that, I see people's cases all the way through, and you just get such a different thing. All right. So, a couple things that I want to point out in this that are really important that have to be mentioned. If you are going through high conflict custody and you want to make it through, you want to have the most probability of being successful in it, here's a couple things that are just, you got to do them. You've probably heard me say them before. I'm going to say them again. One, you need to watch family court. You need to study family court. You need to see it experientially. And your first time stepping in the courtroom should not be for your case. That should be your 15th, 20th time stepping into court. If you can't watch family court, you don't get to give up. You can go online and look at different courts that broadcast their streams. It'll be a pain in the ass to do it. It's not necessarily easy, and you can do it. And tons of guys do it in our groups. Second thing, Community is mandatory. And you might be thinking, I have my community, I have my friends at CrossFit or jujitsu, or my political friends, or my church friends. No, you need friends, or maybe not friends, you need a community of people that understand family court and that understand the process. So you're going, how do I find that? Well, you're watching this right now. People are commenting, right? There's a person, I feel bad about this, but like I'm working all the time for my group, for my community. It's a huge priority for me. Let me check the Zoom feed really quick. Zoom guys, I'll be there in a second. So in this whole deal, within that community, somebody messaged me saying, "Man, I didn't get the contact information for somebody in this on the contact. Do you know him?" And I didn't know him, and then I couldn't reply back because I'm just, dude, I am so pushed to the max with this job right now. It's so crazy. I'm the last 3 weeks have been 60-hour weeks that are freaking insane. But in this whole thing, you need to have support of people who have been through the process. You need to build it, you need to find it in the comments for this, interact with people. If you're watching on TikTok, you can message other people who are watching, you can, whatever. Say to somebody, hey, like add me or whatever. I don't care. I know there's a lot of people who pirate that and then they say things like message me and I'm going to give you some hack for whatever crap. Don't do that. But really try and build some sort of community around this. You have to find people that are involved in this. Your church group will not help you. Your jujitsu team, your CrossFit team, your whatever it is, your yoga team, they give you support, important support, but not the support of what's going to make you quit, what's going to make you lose, what's going to make you quit prematurely or quit at the right time, what's going to navigate false allegations, how you can look through evidence, what's important, what's not. They're not going to send you down, or they're less likely, less probable to send you down false narratives of it, all these different things. Okay. So you'll also, another thing too, this is just really important for community. This happens all the time with us. You can't organize your own evidence. Why? Because you're so attached to it. Rightfully so, you can't organize your own evidence. It's too difficult. You need other people to help you. And you're going to be skewed on how this affects you legally. Doesn't matter if you have a lawyer or not. It's going to be really hard. So you need help with all of those different things. Super important. So, what's the truth about family court fairness? We can't see it as fair. We can't see it as just. But because of that, I'm not telling you that to get nuts and argue it. I'm telling you that so that you can find the ways that work. Okay? You need to find its rules. If you go in with thinking it's just and fair and about truth or whatever, you're going to lose. Okay? The logical step for everybody that also makes them lose is going to be, well, then we need to tear it down or say F it and change the laws. We need to do all those things. But if you are in high conflict, you have to focus on that. You have to focus on winning in that seemingly unfair thing. And you can. It just can't come from the mindset of what your normal expectation of fairness is. I get how horrible that sounds. I get that that sounds just ridiculous and not logical to explain to you. But again, the truth that I know about people winning and losing, that's a pretty big pivot point. You have to learn the new pattern of what wins. So this is the impossible map of family court. You've got to watch family court. You should get in a community. You need to study the laws. You need to work AI properly. You need to be able to work maybe multiple systems of AI, like as I was describing before. You take a long transcript like this, and that may not work with Chat GPT, but you could divide it up and make it work. You need to learn how to make projects in Chat GPT. You need to learn how to use Google Gemini, which can take in larger word count. What am I call it? I forget the actual word for that, but I'll remember once this is done. Probably when I'm editing this and go, man. But you need to understand how to do so much. You need to check your mental game. Your community needs to be very realistic about what works and what doesn't. You need to be able to find those different things. And as always in this, you need to understand that this is all about you. You and your kids live it. I know that. So this is why I want to tell you that what made people win in my groups historically was that responsibility. That even if you have lawyers, if you have anybody helping you, that is key. People are flawed. People make mistakes. People who built the court system are flawed and make mistakes. The court system, you have to win it. And if you don't win, it's a big tragedy, as you know. But those things are predictable, very predictable. Don't be lazy and just say it's so predictable, it's unfair. You know, it's predictable in these ways. Who won, who lost. Study them both. Understand that the first impulse you have is probably wrong. And the reason why that is that it's so attached to the pain and stress you're going through now, all you can see is what will get you out of that pain and stress or what you think will, right? So the first thing you see, the first solution you get is gonna be augmented by that, all right? So I made this video and make these videos for you to win. I made a free community, which I gotta get to because I'm 20 minutes late on, for you to win. I made all the content for you to win, and it's there for you to use. Down below, email list, links to free communities and paid communities, links to playlists on just countless hours on how to navigate through the very problems that you're having that are a result of mentoring just hundreds of guys who have won in the impossible, in the thing that you are told over and over again by men's rights that it's impossible to win, that you're told over and over again by just a random internet TikTok fan feed that it sucks. So all of those different things, they're made for you so that you can make it out of this alive by any variable. Even if you have to take the loss, how do you continue to win in life? It's gonna be hard. None of it's easy. There are no quick fixes, and you can do it. I guarantee you, you can do it. You can also lose, and that's real easy to do, and there's so many different rabbit holes you can go down. So I want you to win. On that note, guys, I am going to get to this Zoom call. I'm gonna talk and interact with the people. We're gonna leave the live stream running, and this is one of those things where I am not gonna do too many live questions off of the YouTube feed and off of the TikTok feed and more on the Zoom feed, which if you wanna get on the next one, which I've done more than 3 this month. If you wanna get on the next one, I promised to do 3 a month, and we've already it's halfway through November, and I think we've done 4. We'll probably do 2 more. For Thanksgiving, we'll do a bunch, actually. Um, you need to be on my email list for that, and so there you go. And so you're asking me, can we have the link? I'm sorry. I mean, join my email list, and you can get the link there. 'Cause I get that you have not been on this entire thing, but, that's where it is. And part of the reason for that is just I mean, like, I got camera, I got phone, I got Zoom, I got YouTube live streaming. There's only so much I could do. Maybe once, um, my email list is on every single YouTube link, every single YouTube feed, but you're watching this on TikTok, so it's on almost every single video there too. You can go to direct.me/Steve Maeda, and if you want that, you can actually go to my profile on TikTok, and you click the little thing of where to find my stuff, and you will get it there. And, you sign up on the email list, and it's great. It's a good one. And man, you can come on and get all the free stuff attached to it and then leave, but in order to be on the live calls, you gotta be on that. So that's how it works. I get that you're just coming in, and there you go. It's mostly for men, yes, but in January of '26, I will make a co-ed group. And we already have a co-ed group going for narcissistic abuse, but not necessarily for the legal stuff just yet. All right. So here's how it works, dudes. You can ask questions in the chat. Yes, I'm talking to the people on the Zoom, but also you can you can raise your hand if you want to talk. I'll call you by your first name. This won't be. You can raise your hand. So I have my speakers muted right now because I want to say this before you talk. So you can raise your hand to talk, which nobody's done that. At least I don't see. And maybe you don't know how to do that in Zoom. That's okay. Um, and I can't hear you if you're talking because I have my speakers muted. So just listen for a second. And if you want to talk, just understand that TikTok people can hear you, YouTube can hear you, and the YouTube recording will be will stay on YouTube. So I'm only going to call you by your first name. You can stop talking if it gets too crazy. If you go, man, I'm too nervous, no problem. Okay. And what else? I think that's it. So if this gets too wild and crazy and you just want to stop, I don't care. So, John, I'm going to assume you got a question and you wrote a question in here, but I haven't read it yet. I just see PPO. Share as much as you want. I will unmute you now. Share as much as.
All right. Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, there's a little bit of an echo if you have headphones.
Second. I got these guys. Let's see.
Technology today. Well, thanks for coming on as you're setting that up. I'll just stop talking.
Let's see.
And definitely take your time with.
All right.
I'm putting everybody on mute again for a second, just until you get it squared away. Just give me a thumbs up, like I'm watching your video right now. Just give me a thumbs up when you're good with the headphones. I think he's actually frozen, or I'm frozen. But something to remember, people who are calling in on Zoom. You got your headphones working? Am I echoing still? Oh, I'm still echoing. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have a very complicated story. I won't say that my ex-wife is a narcissist, but I'll tell you that she actually used my daughter to manipulate me to.
Hey, dude, can you mute your speakers? Or turn your speakers all the way down?
How's that? Is that better?
No.
Oh man. That's,
Maybe it's my end.
I mean, I hear an echo on your end for sure. I don't know. This popped up. Okay, how's that? Can you hear me better? Great. No echo?
No, there's an echo. Let me try something. This I am, but I've never had this happen before. Give me one moment. Let me try something.
Okay.
Hmm. Man. Well, here's what we'll do, man. I'm gonna I'm gonna use headphones myself to help solve this problem.
Right.
All right, go for it, and then nobody will hear you, and I'll just repeat your question. How's that work?
Yeah, that's fine. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay right now?
Hey, with all the technical difficulties, I can hear you.
Hello?
I'm going on mute. Just please talk, or else this will just not work.
Okay. Okay, you can hear me right now.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Got it. Yeah, it's kind of glitchy. All right, so just quick backstory. My ex-wife manipulated my daughter into manipulating me, having an affair partner come to a birthday party. Because at that point, I found out that this guy was not actually just a friend, but they were having a relationship behind the scenes. We ended up, I ended up leaving after finding out that she was committing sexual acts in public with my kids in the car. Just a week later, when I thought it was just an emotional affair, and then it went physical. We separated, and over the following several months, my mental health just went in the trash. I ended up getting diagnosed with complex PTSD. It was a lot of taunting. She brought another affair partner to my daughter's first play. Um, Intentionally on our anniversary, just a few months after we had separated, made a lot of degrading comments to me. You know, we tried to go to counseling, told the pastor, I screwed this guy so that our marriage would be over. He also said, do I need to fuck your brother if you give up on me? Excuse my language, but that's what she said. And it just rocked me. I had no idea this is who she was. She had everyone fooled, even my twin sister, who was her best friend at the time. Fast forward to, our divorce happens essentially 9 months after the separation. Um, Her second boyfriend or whatever, they break up. She's going broke. She spent $20,000 on a new job. She went on a dozen different vacations, neglecting, her own work responsibilities. And I ended up having to go to psych wards. I became highly suicidal. Probably 4 or 5 psych wards, a bunch of different medications. And I called her one night and asked her to come pick up the children because of my declining mental health. And rather than picking them up, she was off drinking, didn't want to help out or anything. So I ended up getting my parents to intervene. 2 days later, he ends up getting them, and I'm supposed to get them in the afternoon for their birthdays, taking to Chuck E. Cheese. Well, she demanded that I not only give her child support for 2 months ahead of schedule, but also pay the phone bill. Otherwise, I wasn't allowed to pay her phone bill. Otherwise, I wasn't allowed to take them for the court ordered um, appearing time with them. So I left even after I agreed to pay it, even though I was a bit upset about it. The next day, cop shows up with a protection order, and it says that I was threatening to kill myself and my children. And because of kind of where my mental state was at the time, I was totally concerned about, fighting this head on. I thought, you know what, let me just defer this. I got a lawyer involved. We got a continuance. It was just going to be temporarily parental supervision. My parents were happy to, get involved. They knew I was really depressed, traumatized, and I, like a dumbass, I actually tried to take my own life and send a goodbye video rather than her calling to check in. I got arrested for a possession of violation. And then the jail, they didn't give me any medication. I'm required to take different medications for sleep and the complex PTSD, emotional regulation. I get out of jail in 2 weeks later, was held in solitary confinement. I'm manic, and I end up trying to purchase a firearm in this diluted state, no criminal history. They rearrest me. Again, no medication. They let me out. I'm on an ankle monitor with crazy restrictions. I can only take one road in the whole city. I mean, it was like I was a murderer. I ended up violating the area. Not that I went in any place, within the vicinity of her. I just went allegedly on a road I wasn't supposed to go. Rearrested, spent 5 more months in solitary confinement. Finally get out of jail. Was held on a $100,000 cash only bond. Again, no criminal history, no domestic violence, just severely mentally ill. And they were crushing my meds, refusing a Bible. I was trying to kill myself when I was in jail. I didn't get a certificate for basically, the whole time from February. We got divorced in November of 2023. I see my kids basically February of 2024 until July of 2025. So like 18 months. Well, what happened in December of 2024 is she reached out to my dad and said, hey, the death order has been changed. What I didn't realize is that because I was incarcerated, my attorney asked for a 6-month continuance. It was going to be a December hearing. And he said, hey, look, dude, you kind of screwed this up for us. And I'll admit that. I really did not, I should have been better about taking the mental health medications and trying not to do too much too quickly, and understanding the severity of the situation. But anyways, December, she reached out to my dad and said, changed, it wasn't changed. I reached out to her parents, trying to let them know, thinking, oh, hey, I'm allowed to have contact. Rearrested, I was still at $185,000 bond. Jail again didn't give me my medication. My mother was an RN, crying, begging the judge, please give him the meds. So after 2 weeks, I'm really bashing my head in the hole on a metal door to get medication, or they give me any sort of meds, and then the jail runs out of meds a week later. I get found incompetent to proceed. They try and send me to a state hospital, but it's a 9-month wait. And they were going to send me for a year to a state hospital to be restored for competency. So anyways, I get out after 4 more months of solitary confinement. It was against Colorado law. Colorado law has passed a bill, House Bill 21-1211, that strictly prohibits this, and it's constituted as physical torture. And it's jacked me up. I'm on 5 different medications. My sleep I have nightmares, flashbacks, panic attacks. I'm seeing 4 different mental health providers. I got to see my kids finally in July. And then my daughter, she's 10, she asked, hey, Dad, why did you leave Mommy? And I told her the truth. I said, you know what? Your mom was unfaithful. Doesn't make her a bad person, but that's what happened. She took that back to her mom, and then she claimed that I was an imminent risk to my children, and now it's medically supervised visits. Again, I was originally, an entrepreneur making, close to $250,000 a year, very successful. I'm a young man. I'm 29 years old. We separated when I was 26. I made $250,000 that year. And I've just seen everything, my whole life fall apart. Business, finance, custody, the legal system. They think I'm this crazy guy that's going to hurt people, yet it's all predicated on her false claims. And so now I find myself in a situation where I'm back to not being able to see my children because I realize I have got to stabilize my mental health. I'm doing inpatient ketamine treatment, trying to see if that will help the PTSD symptoms. I watched a guy slit his throat 6 times when I was in the hole. I tried committing suicide again. I was on belly chains and shackles for about 3 of the 9 months. I lost 30 pounds in 30 days. It's just been so much trauma back to back to back to back that, you know, if anyone would have told me this was what I was going to go through, I would not be alive. I mean, it's insane to think that I've been through what I've been through. So anyways, I filed 12 different motions trying to get, you know, the fact that she lied to the police. I contacted the police department. They failed to intervene in a meaningful way. I notified the judge that she lied. She lied to the police. I've notified my criminal defense attorneys that she lied to the police. And it's like everyone is just kind of like, well, the protection order is a protection order. You know, you're going to have to wait 2 years. And so I'm like, what the hell do I have to do to just get justice for my kids? Fuck me. Just what my daughter literally was talking about wanting to go be with Jesus because she can't see her daddy. My kids love me to pieces. And there was a CPS report the day after she got the TPO. They did a 12-page investigation, investigated all of my mental health providers, investigated my parents, investigated me, investigated my children, and it came back as unfounded. Yet the court, oh, she's a woman, so yeah, we're going to go ahead and give her this TPO, yet the ones that actually investigated said it was totally unfounded. So I don't know what to do from here.
All right, man. So you probably have a long road. With all of this, it's kind of like none of this replaces mental health help, legal help. Like you really need to look at a lot of that throughout all of this. But I will say, in working a lot with people with these types of issues and so on, I mean, like, it's pretty rough. And like when I talk to people about the different clients and so on of mine that have died and these types of things, it was all addiction and mental health related. And in custody, those things happen. I don't want to diminish them, but it's much more common in the mental health and addiction space. Okay. So with what I'm saying, you know, we're just trying to pass the night, and you have to take real proactive action on your mental health and your legal stuff. By the way, I fixed the audio issue. Anyway, there were possibly multiple feeds coming in through me or whatever. So sorry about that. But okay, man, in order for you to get rights back, where are you at with any protective order? What's happening with any of that right now?
So as of right now, because of the criminal charges with the BPOs, there's criminal protection orders or NPOs, and then there's civil protection orders. Because of the recent hearing in September, where she claimed that I was an imminent risk to my children, and all I did, honest to God, was she let me go to I was at my twin sister's house. She said, yeah, the kids can go in and visit with John. There was no supervision at the time. She was recognizing that it was on the up and up. It's been 2 years or more since I've been to a psych ward, or about 2 years since I've been to a psych ward. Haven't had any suicide attempts outside of the solitary confinement. And I've been stable on my medication, you know, trying to show, okay, I'm taking this stuff seriously. You know, I can't control what happens to me, but I can control what I do with what happens.
When were you last institutionalized?
And so I thought, oh, okay, great. I'm going to take my kids to the park.
Sorry. I just said, when were you last institutionalized is what I asked.
Are you there?
Yeah. You hear me or no?
Oh, it's been like 2 years.
Okay. Sorry, there was a delay. I didn't mean to interrupt, but keep going with your story.
Yeah, so basically the temporary protection order became permanent in December of 2024. So we're almost on 1 year of that. Because I told my daughter that her mother was unfaithful, she got another civil protection order claiming that they were in imminent harm. The only thing that happened was I took my children on a car ride to go pick up the hoverboard from my friend. And I was supposed to have a supervisor with me. I did not. That was the only evidence, which I admitted to on the stand. You know, I'm a Christian. I believe in telling the truth. And it's also the law. So I said, yep, I did take them, but the box was not checked on the permanent protection order, and I wasn't even at the hearing. And I asked in a motion for clarification on the protection order, and it was denied. And the judge understood. She literally stated, I understand why there is confusion, yet ruled in my ex-wife's favor. Didn't want to look at any of the evidence of me being physically and psychologically abused by her as well, and lying to the police.
Okay, so dude,
so
this,
I'm just kind of at a loss.
Yeah, just because I think there's a delay, let me talk for a second, and I'm going to mute the speakers, but I'll come right back to you. But just to deal with the delay stuff, I'm just going to mute it so I can't hear you, but I'll be able to hear you in a second. Okay, so first off, when we're dealing with like mental health stuff, the biggest examples of this I could pull from working with addicts. So I worked with addicts before I really dove deep into custody stuff, and that's where you saw women and men just get, you know, annihilated by the court, and maybe for good reason, right? Like it went both ways. Like some of it was unjust, some of it was just, like there was abuse or addiction going on in front of the kids, and moving into major mental health issues or from that. A lot of times there's what they call dual diagnosis. And so then what you saw was this insane process. So what I hear, and again, I'm not trying to be a bearer of bad news, and I don't really know the exactness of your case, but what I would guess in a lot of this is that you've got to follow the process of what somebody with those specific issues around mental illness, what they see towards rehabilitation in it. So with addiction, it would be some 12-step stuff, IOP programs, whatever court-appointed addiction things that you would have to do, and then there would have to be pure compliance. Like you are not arguing with what they're recommending, and also because you're on the back foot here. Like, so what you told me was whether or not you and I would agree that would be good or bad to tell your daughter that, we have to be so clean with all those things. And so in my group, in all cases, for therapeutic reasons, which there's a lot of research which the different therapists in the groups could go over, and for legal reasons, at any level, if somebody says, you know, why did you and mom break up? We will say, and it depends on the different age of how we would explain it, but almost always we bypass it. Meaning, we can't talk about that. That's for adults. Whatever the different age range it is, there's some answer that's saying we're not going to talk about those things. So for general therapeutic ideas, our take, which again, there's really not a lot of evidence on telling the truth to your kids about whatever, like about why you guys split up. There's not a lot of evidence on that being beneficial, but there's a ton on how it could go wrong. And again, probably not studied enough. There needs to be more detail to it, but it's safer to go with we're going to get around that one. And so much to the point where the different therapists in our group will argue that it goes into even that child becoming an adult. So not until they have a certain amount of life experience, because the reason being is statistically it would not be a great thing, and just what outcomes that could result from it. And again, needs to be studied more and probably isn't enough. And then also because their meaning of what that is very different than your meaning. And so to build that translation of what it means to you so they would understand it is almost impossible in the whole span of 0 to 18 years and maybe even beyond. So they're just going to mean different things, and we don't know that as we're saying it, okay? And statistically, it just doesn't work out in a good favor. But if there's any sort of threats of protective orders, that is, man, it wouldn't go there. And then there's probably a whole checklist of other things where you could be trapped and screwed over and put in jail for, and violations and all that sort of stuff. The other thing too is if you need a supervisor, you need a supervisor. So if there were anybody talking to me in terms of mental illness and those types of things, and some issues have come up in it, we want to understand that the court is going to be hyper reactive to that. and they want to be really careful. So they don't want any loopholes to slip into something where it would be, noticeably bad by them. Then this brings up the other thing. What about her? She's crazy. This all got kicked off by her. True, but if we have any argument towards that, we have to take care of us first. So right now we have the spotlight on us. So anytime in family law, when we have the spotlight on us, any sort of different restraining orders, protective orders, those are the priority. So all other arguments, even if they're all lied about, like this is one of the hardest things. Like I relate with this, you all relate with this, the guys in my group relate with this. We have to start with how do we defend ourselves? And maybe it's not a defense. It's just, we're going to do what you say for what that is. And again, the best example I have of this is when I worked with addicts, still do. But man, if you're an addict and you're dual diagnosis or not, and you get your kids taken away from you, you have to do things their way. And any little thing, it always sets you back, like the next court date, 3 months, 6 months, and so on. Horrible. All right. So what I would say is that's where we need to start with. And then again, when you get into high stress and mental health, which is like a big thing that has always existed in all of my communities, we have to be really careful. Like, so anything that could trigger stress. This is a smaller thing, but for one of my clients, I did a smaller deal that more has to do with like social anxiety and levels of rejection and not fitting in, right? But it moves into a consistent pattern of relapse. And so one of the things in there is like the relapse is most likely in working with them, watching them. It's not coming from the rejection being so bad and then I'm overwhelmed and then, I'm this terrible person and I can't get whatever. It's more that things aren't working. I'm doing everything right. So I'm not saying this is true for you, but we have to start looking at why are these triggers happening and what's my support system. So the cookie cutter thing that then goes for that is that in anything where there's a challenge, okay, so we have to find success. We have to get like 10 successes, or we have to have 10 points of adversity within a certain system or behavioral thing that really works. This is really important. This is probably the most important thing for you and your survival and mental health. We need some protocol with 10 points of stress to see how it works, to see what works and what doesn't. Okay. So it might just be within 2 or 3 times we see what works, but within 10 points of stress, we need to have some protocol that we're always doing. So what I usually recommend to people is like, okay, therapy, psychologist, meds, all those things are looked at and observed in a regular pattern, right? So that's step 1, but you're doing that, okay? So we got that. And then we also need a support system of people who understand you. So in your case, there could be custody, but that wouldn't be enough. I think this would be obviously helpful. There needs to be something that understands mental health situations and what you go through to understand what happens in the, what begins. So they always say trigger, but there's also something that's telling before that. Like, am I getting angry too many times? Am I forgetting things too many times? Is this happening, in a day where you may know this pattern, or people who've studied whatever's going on with you might be able to point these things out, but like simple math eludes you and that happens twice in one day or a couple times in a week, you might need to start getting your support system or, talking to whatever professionals around you. Whatever that is, you want to determine what that is. And that could be tough because there's not a lot of information on these things, but people who are specialists in whatever is going on might be able to tell you a few more trigger points of that. If there's an active community of that, so the good thing about mental health is it's easier to find communities, not perfect, I get that, but easier to find communities that are more accepted and welcomed than divorce and custody communities. Like, it's kind of crazy, right? So that could be good to start looking at what that pattern is. And then you go through the normal stresses of life and you see what works and what doesn't. And that's tough because it's your life on the line, right? But that is super, super, super important because When you're fighting for your kid, you're going to get poked way more than normal. Way more than normal. And you have to have that in place. And there could even be things, this is a tricky thing with mental health, especially when it's acknowledged, like you have to prove that you're stable. And the courts trust that. But you might not see things the same way. So everybody in a custody battle that's high conflict misperceives everything. Every normal, sane, they took all whatever mental health, psychological evaluation, and nothing comes up, misperceive everything. All right. So then if we have like some sort of trigger, we're more likely to misperceive something and really believe it. And then we're shooting or we're aiming for a target that doesn't exist, right? It's impossible to hit it from there. So we want our perspectives to be in check. And I just think like you understanding some sort of ecosystem of stability that's social and daily. So medication, interaction, psychoanalysis, therapy, as well as social component, and all these things that have a daily protocol is best for starting out with the high conflict thing. And then you have to prove the court that you're doing what they want by their standards. So with an addict, the court will say something that might not work, right? And then after all of that, after they say you're good, then you can start your argument for the issues with her. Now, if we get really structured with this, I'm gonna unmute in just 1 second. If we get really structured with this, then we start to go through our defense that hopefully in tandem can produce stuff that would work against her. So for instance, if you do the whole psych eval thing or you're going through these mental health checklists, you could also ask her to do that and possibly your kids do that or so on. And maybe they already have, but this would produce more evidence that could be used possibly for you. Another thing too might be like, let's say they might find it favorable for you to be deposed. Well, it could also be favorable for you to depose her. And then this could be proving that you're a safe and a mentally regulated father and that this could happen, but it's also creating court documents that could work in your favor once you're done with this so that you could argue for custody. And when this does flip, like it, who knows, right? But like, okay, I'm a safe father. Okay, that's established. And then it switches, right? To where you can start to move on the attack, if that's possible. Cool. I'm going to unmute. You're free to ask any follow-up questions if you like.
Yeah, I think that was there was a lot of really good information. I'll comment that I have learned a lot about myself and about emotional composure. I do believe that I'm very temperate. I don't, I've been diagnosed with complex PTSD, major depression, and a general anxiety disorder, and then I have insomnia. But what I've learned from the solitary confinement and all the oppression that I experienced was rather than getting into the fight mode of fight or flight, I kind of just go to sleep. I kind of internalize, face the emotions, and let them pass and recognize that hey, they will pass. And I've learned patience. When you're in a cell 22 to 24 hours a day, you learn that.
How long were you
in a major rush, other than 9 months.
Oh.
And I have no criminal charge or no. Yeah, 9 months straight. Or no, I'm sorry, 5.5 months, and then 3.5 months of solitary confinement. And I'm in the middle of suing the county right now for it. So, anyways, it's highly corrupt. The sheriff even visited my best friend, who was like, "You got to get him the hell out of there. This is not okay." And he didn't do anything. So it's highly corrupt. But I think that the biggest thing that I'm curious of is I had that CPS investigation It shows from the get that I was reaching out to her to try and get her to intervene on stop, and she didn't come and pick up the kids. And yet she used that against me. Yes, I understand that I need to follow the court orders and show compliance and show stability. I'm working with 4 different mental health providers, 2 psychiatrists, 1.
Man, he cut off. You're back.
Oh, yeah. Hey, sorry. Yeah, I'm working with a doctor, 2 psychiatrists, and an LCP. I've been working with a therapist on a weekly basis ever since I've gotten out. I just upped the therapy as soon as this, medically supervised time was ordered. I was like, all right, I'm going balls to the wall. Like, I'm making this a full-time thing. I'm helping the homeless every week. I'm involved in several church groups. I've got a strong support system, close friends, people that have known me for a while that can attest to the fact that, hey, this is a good dude who's always wanted the best for his kids, always wants the best for others. And I'm taking my medication. And the good thing, Steve, is I have actually been either in jail or on monitored UAs for 2 years. So much so that they dropped the UA requirement on my criminal cases because there was no allegations or evidence to suggest that I've ever had a drug-related or alcohol-related problem. So that is in my favor.
Hey, go ahead.
Go ahead. And I want to say that I do have medical documents from my first psych ward stay, as well as witnesses to attest to my ex-wife's taunting behavior. I mean, who the hell brings your affair partner to your daughter's birthday party when you're still married, convincing everyone that he's just a friend, and then a week later you're doing sexual acts at a public park with your kids left in the car, and then 3 months later you bring a different dude to your daughter's first play? No wonder I went to the hospital. My first psych ward stay, I gave away my guns. I'm a big gun enthusiast. I gave away my guns. It's in the medical report because I didn't feel safe with them, because I had held a gun up to my head. And I gave them to my father. I gave the bullets away, all my guns. And then they took away my gun rights. And I'm like, what the hell? I was always responsible with this. So I showed active awareness of, hey, my mental state's declining. I'm having very irrational thoughts. I need to do things to protect myself. And so anyways, that's what I've got as a reply. And maybe if you have, some comments on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. I just put it on mute again just to, easily navigate this whole thing. I'm going to move on to somebody else after this. First off, thanks so much for coming on, and thanks for sharing all that. A lot of stuff. I really want to just say, like, dude, man, I deal with so much trauma stuff. It's like, people will say, like, how does a meth addict or a coke addict become an addict? Whatever. There's all sorts of ways, right? But once you become one and you're an addict, you live through so much horrific torture. It changes your mind. Being in solitary confinement for 5 months or even 3 or whatever it was, like for whatever period of time, for 2 days, right? It's meant to make you crazy, and so things compound from that. And that's kind of the idea with complex PTSD. And again, if you're going through these things, please get help. Like, watching me talk about it is not going to be the treatment, right? So the idea is that there's sustained trauma from multiple different angles, and then the trigger points of it are different. So a long time ago, they used to say that PTSD happened with people that had trauma when they were younger, which is probably true, right? And it gave the mind a different window. Like, so let's say you had something happen when you were a kid, and then you go through something in your 20s, and it somehow hits whatever weird amygdala, striatum, crazy, brain map thing of where it ignites into something where it's post-traumatic stress. In complex PTSD, there's multiple of those things, and so it hits on all these different definitions. So if we have in our brain, like fear, and then fear turns into a thought that's tangible, right? So, but at first it's just an impulse that goes in multiple different thoughts and directions in different places where it has roadmaps in the mind. Okay. And again, all of this is so theoretical, but it does make sense when you've experienced these things. That the longer it goes on, the worse it gets. The pain of losing kids, dude, man, get the help. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it, and for opening up about all the personal different things. What I believe, who knows with different people, but like I believe you can get the help of mental stability. I've seen a lot of people with a lot of bad stuff get in good places. We're all changed forever in some way, but get to a place where we can be functioning. We can not have severe panic and horrific things be our regular. And a man, I hope you get there. Like, yeah, here, I'll unmute you again.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate your insight, and I love that you're doing this, man. I mean, I think you're a godsend to so many people by taking taking the torch and running forward with what so many men go through. I've lost a best friend to suicide because of this exact situation. And there's so many other men I hear that they get overwhelmed, and money runs out, relationships run out, self-worth is in the toilet, depression hits, and they just end it. So thank you for doing this, man. You give hope to a lot of men because of this.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. We're going a little bit long. There's been an ebb and flow of people on the Zoom. We got another person on. Did you want to say anything? Did you have any question? Comments?
Mr. David.
Well, if not, that's fine too. I'm going to wrap it up because we're going to do another live stream, I think tomorrow. All right. Actually, you know what? Tomorrow morning, I usually do one. Oh, snap. I gotta figure out what that is. But that will just be a live stream. There won't be Zoom interaction. This one, my presentation went a little bit longer, and there were a bunch of guys who came in and out of the Zoom. John, I'm glad we talked to you, definitely, but always wish we could talk to more people. In terms of a live stream with Zoom interaction, probably Tuesday night, we'll hit one up, 9:30 Central Time, whatever that is for you. Chicago, Austin, that's mine. So check that out. It'll probably be at like 10:30 my time is when we bring on the Zoom call, and I hope to talk to you guys then. That one will also be more Q&A based, so we'll have this running and all that sort of good stuff. In any case, I'm going to go to sleep because this gets problematic. And man, I hope you guys do well. Man, anything to help out. Trying to do my best and get you guys and gals and whoever's listening in the right direction. All right. Talk to you soon. Man, John, good to meet you. All the best, likewise, my man. All right. Ciao. And you fancy people listening on the YouTubes. Ha. Yeah. Well, we'll wrap this one up and talk to you guys soon. Maybe even tomorrow morning. Later.